So it is the time to introduce the next speaker. We have Nicolas Chaulet. I probably didn't pronounce your name correctly. Nicolas is a CTO at Canoa, and he's gonna talk us through a sneak peek into a Revit-less interior architecture. I'm really looking forward to seeing some probably hands-on Canoa software, right? Or some look into the technology behind it. But I'll let Nicolas introduce himself, and I'll be here behind the scenes if you need anything.
Thank you. Thanks, Matteo. Thanks, everyone, for chiming in. It's really excited to be talking to this conference. I think I've listened to a few of the talks, and it's just amazing what I'm doing today. I've left the design computation scene a few years back, and things have changed quite a bit since then. So I'm Nicolas. I'm the CTO at Canoa. We are 1 year old, and we build software to design, deploy, and manage commercial interiors, really. And so today I've picked this title because I think we just ended up with this conclusion that whatever we were doing, we couldn't use a software such as Revit. And before we go any further, I have to say this: I've never used Revit. I've maybe programmed a few tools for Revit once in a while, but like it was never. So, you know, if you're looking for content where I've been frustrated and things, it's just not me. And hopefully, like by the next slide, you'll understand why we had to go with something that doesn't use Revit, or for the matter, any of the existing CAD software that would be desktop-based or and so on. And really, there are a few reasons for it. You know, there are a few things that anybody knows about Revit or about this kind of software. That they are firstly built for ground-up construction, and they solve a really hard problem, which is coordination and documentation of these very complex construction projects. And the problem we're addressing at Canoa is a bit different. We're doing interior architecture, so it's not really the same thing. Timescale, timelines, and complexity are very, very different. The second thing that is evident is that it's expensive. It's not only expensive in terms of licensing costs, it's also expensive in terms of training and, you know, getting your people and getting users onboarded. And so, you know, hopefully by the next few slides, you understand where we're coming from with this. So in this presentation, I just start by explaining why Canoa and what we're trying to do as a business, and then I dive deeper into the product itself. And indeed, there will be a demo at some point. And I try to keep the presentation short and sweet. So if you have any questions, just, you know, keep marking them, and I'm happy to have a much longer conversation after the presentation. There are many probably points that I won't mention that you might want to hear about, so just feel free to fire those questions. So why Canoa, and what are we up to? So this all starts from, you know, one of the obvious things today, which is that we, you know, society is trying to solve a big challenge with climate change, and a big part of this is coming from our existing building stock, and actually 2/3 of existing buildings that we have today are going to still be there in 2050. So those buildings have to be used and reused, and we have to do this very better than what we've done in the past. So just to give you an idea, like a building in New York stays up for more than 90 years, and it undergoes major renovation every 10 years, and, you know, smaller renovations every 3 or 5 years. So furniture changes a lot in buildings. And so the big consequence of that is that if you look at the carbon that the building would have throughout its whole life cycle, after 60 years, more than 50% of its embodied carbon is coming from tenant improvements. So this could be furniture, partitions, you know, all the things that you do when you renovate a space. And this is really for commercial office buildings. And so commercial interiors really matter in terms of climate change, and we need to do better than what we've been doing until now. We need to stop using gypsum boards and all that kind of things. And so this is really the observation we made. Like, if we want to have an impact on climate change, as you know, if working in the building industry, we have to look at the existing building stock. And at Canoa, we have a lot of expertise in commercial interiors. So we say, let's just start with it. And we set ourselves a goal. We said, like, let's manage 100 million square feet. And manage means we're going to design the interior and then redesign it and reuse this furniture multiple times so that we lower the impact of tenant improvement in terms of climate change. And so the big question is, how do you achieve designing and managing 100 million square feet of commercial interiors with a small team, and with all the complexity that live around it? And so that's where, like, relying on workflows that are traditional construction workflows is just really complicated. To get to this kind of number, it means a lot of projects every year. It means every project could be between a few weeks to a few months at maximum, so never years. And so all our design cycles and procurement cycles have to be really fast. So, and that's where, like, using traditional workflows and using Revit and using this kind of tools just breaks. So coming out of that, there are a few observations that we found, is that, or that we kind of decided upon. The first thing is that, like, part of our system has to be self-served, because we're not going to have a big impact on this, and we're not going to, like, make a contribution if we do everything ourselves. It's really hard to build a business that's big but tries to penetrate the construction industry that way. And so we thought, like, let's try to build software that help people design and manage and deploy interior spaces. The second point is that projects are really fast. So back to my point, like, we're talking about a few weeks to a few months maximum. It's never years. The third point is that FF&E and furniture need to be work harder than just being chairs. We need to think about our rooms and our walls potentially as just furniture blocks. So instead of using hard partitions that you build and destroy and throw away, you can think about rooms as volumes that are manufactured off-site and then just reassembled on site. And so you can reuse these rooms. They are just volumes and not walls. And the last thing, which is important to us, is that we build a sustainable business at Canoa. So we're here to stay, and we're here to have a business that leaves something behind. So that's why we started with commercial interior. We decided to have an impact, and so part of this impact goes through software build. So what kind of business are we building? We are building a managed marketplace, a B2B marketplace that focuses on deploying and buying or selling, building products that are planet conscious and that can also facilitate the reuse of existing stock. So that's really what we're up to. We're just building a marketplace. And alongside that, we're addressing the planet conscious by really creating ready to deploy kits and architectural solution that just for a workplace that just work. And so here you can see a few things that we've been doing for the last year. So on the left-hand side, you see our like architectural solution for what we call like a canvas. It's basically taking a space and putting all the infrastructure you need so that you can then use modular architecture inside. So you can plug in rooms that you can see on the right-hand side. And so all the piping and HVAC is done beforehand, and then you can just plug into an existing engineering system. So that's been a lot of work that has happened. And so we're creating all these things and all these templates that can be redeployed from one space to the next. And once the place has been fitted, we can reassemble it without destroying any wall, without breaking anything, without throwing anything away. But there are a few things that still remain with this thing, is that deploying furniture is really hard. And it's really hard because it involves a lot of people. And I think I listened to a few talks, and some of them talked about industrialized construction. And some of the things we're trying to address are similar in nature, in the sense that we have different stakeholders, and it's not because the designer said something that at the end of a food chain, when it gets deployed or when it gets installed, this thing is still valid. Like a lot of the time, there that happens, and then just things break. And so this is roughly how it works today on a typical deployment cycle for an office, let's say. So you have an architect that comes in, they design a space, they create furniture, they choose colors, they choose fabric, they draw walls and partitions, and they do that hand in hand with the client. So there are a lot of back and forth, involved in here, and discussions and whatnot. Once this is done, they pass the ball to another actor, to another player, which is a furniture vendor and then the installer. So that's the deploy step. And here, again, there are a lot of back and forth that happens because what the designer designs, so the furniture they specified, are not necessarily available anymore. And, or, they might have put a SKU number or like, an item number that actually doesn't exist in the catalog, or, is not specific enough for the vendor. And so again, there are a few back and forth between to end up with the actual list of things that are going to be installed. And finally, when this is all done, you end up installing it, and then hopefully someone tracks those items and knows where they are and can manage their life cycle. But those three things are really decoupled. It's different people, different timelines, and they, like the way the data transfer from one to the next is really through spreadsheets and drawings and annotated drawings. So, and I think, it's just a classic thing, and it's happening everywhere, and it's working as a process. It's just that it's very slow, it's prone to error, and if we go back to our objective of managing 100 million square feet, it's just not going to work that way. Especially like there is no way after you've deployed it, it's really hard to re-measure into working with an architect or designer. It's just not happening. So the thing with building is really to break these barriers and let the data flow between those different blocks, so that it's still different actors, but the data remains the same, and the data is consistent from one step to the next. And certainly what happens is that as soon as the data flows throughout, and then when you're at the point where you've deployed your space, you track the items you've deployed, and you can certainly reinject them into the design process. So that's the whole idea. Like, we're just trying to merge those different steps, make them simpler, something that can be reused at the end. And eventually, that's how we condense the life cycle of a project. That's how we make things happen faster. That's why we reduce error. That's why we allow reuse of furniture, and so on and so forth. And this thing happens by developing our own custom software that is really focused on space planning and space monitoring. So in the next slide, so this slide is just a quick introduction to the different components of it, and then I'll give a demo. So bear with me for one more minute, and then we jump in the software itself. So we see the product being a chair, a table, all these goods, lighting equipment, and so on and so forth, as being the center of this whole thing. And so it all starts with a catalog of products that we maintain and create for our own customers. Those products can be arranged in space to create templates and kits. So if you want to assemble a whole room, you could, and then you can reuse that in different layouts. But we have this whole library that is maintained, is up to date, has got accurate data around lead times, embodied carbon, all these kind of things, pricing. Then you can get from this catalog and place them into floor plans. So you can start assembling them into a semantically rich floor plan, and group things by different zones to be sure you're thinking. And this design floor plan step is really much like a space planning exercise and your arrange thing. And we've done this in such a way that it's collaborative. We can have commenting and all these kind of things that allow your client or your customer to just chime in and say, give feedback on what you've done in the context of this floor plan, and not in the context of a spreadsheet or not in the context of a JPEG. It's an actual thing that you can interrogate. Once everything is good with this floor planning exercise, then we go to the next step, which is the buy and install step. And this is really like procuring the goods and installing them on site. And if I go back to us building a sustainable business, that's where we make most of our money today. It's as we sell furniture, we act as a vendor, we act as a furniture vendor, and that's where we take most of our fee today. There is a fee for using the platform, but it's nothing compared to the act of deploying things. And finally, once you deploy your space, we manage your floor plan. So we have a nice built floor plan that comes out of it, which is whatever has been installed. We use scanning to capture this data. And this is used for tracking your goods on the longer term. And then most of our clients today, they stay with us for 3 years or more. They sign for 3 years. And so this means that we're with them whenever we deploy space, we manage this space for the next 3 years. And so we are committed to giving them the best and to giving them accurate data. And they are committed to using our software for managing their space. So that's how we try to encourage reuse of goods, and by staying with our users and not just saying, we've deployed a space, that's it, now you can manage it yourself. Which on the flip side is saying, we're staying with you, we're helping you move a few things around, rearrange some part of your layouts, and so on and so forth. So that's the whole idea of the software we're building. And I just give a quick demo of what this looks like today. So it all starts here with all your layouts, and so I've prepared something for you guys today. And that's a building in New York, but we've just used that as demo content. And there are a few things that happen here. On the left-hand side, we have access to the portfolio of all the locations that we're managing. We have access to all the layouts and schedules that come out of it, and so on. We have access to the library of goods that we can use. And we have access to templates, which are like, generic description of how much of each thing you should have in a given space. And this is really geared towards, being able to build reusable generic components that, say, if you have a space and you've designed this space multiple times, then you can apply this template, and it tells you how many chairs you have, how many tables, how many people you can fit in this sort of space. So now I am in my layout. The floor plan is really like, in that case, it's JPEG that we brought in. We've drawn a zone that we call the scope around this boundary here, and we're only looking at this area. That's the only thing we're doing for this client. And we started by laying out a few zones. So in red, you have everything that has to do with collaboration. In blue, you have everything that has to do with focus time. Sorry, in light blue, it's focus time, and then in dark blue, it's gatherer spaces, so reception areas, sofas, and so on. And then once you've done that, you can start laying out furniture really. And so here, all of these little things are groups or blocks that you can reuse and duplicate. And they are semantic, meaning they know what they are. They know they shouldn't intersect with their neighbors, because you shouldn't have a table on top of another one. And you can really start playing around and trying different options. So I can distribute them a bit more, to give a bit more breathing space here. These are bookshelves, and so I can just redistribute them around or create a partition between these 2 rows of tables. It's really like what you would expect from from any kind of CAD tool that allows you to draw things around. But the key difference here is that every one of them, as I mentioned, is semantic, and it knows about which products which product comes with it. So, for example, this one is linked to a kit that has got a table and 4 chairs, and I have pricing information for those. I have a discount, I have a lead time, and this is extremely powerful because it means that I can aggregate this information into a schedule of goods. And so as soon as I start drawing, I already know, all the projects I have an idea of the total it's going to cost me, and so on and so forth. And so here you can see, for example, I'm missing a few items that are not specified. So for example, these bookshelves, they don't have any product associated to them. So I'm just going to dive and go and edit this guy just to add and specify it. And really what matters here is that we don't need to you can draw with symbols at the beginning. You don't need to worry about having a product or not. And then as the product, as the layout evolves, as your conversation evolves with your client, you can start specifying your product a bit more, tapping into our library of products that are maintained and have up-to-date information. And I'm just going to look for a bookshelf. Looks like I have only one, so it will have to do for now. And maybe that's not the right dimension. I will have to take that later. But for now, let's say I want some idea of how my schedule evolved. And so if I go back, the bookshelf is specified, and it's contributing to the whole pricing information. So another thing we really wanted to do was to make sure we take compliance into consideration, because as part of the design process, you always want to make sure you have the right amount of plumbing fixture. The people you have are you're going to really be allowed to put this many people in your space. And so we've built in a code compliance checker in our software. And so in that case, we actually are going to rely on the New York building codes. This is because this building is in New York. It was built in 1912. And so we know which building code it needs to use. And this is all in-house documentation that we've done. And that now we're pulling out. And so in that case, it's going to pull from this code and check for, based on the amount of bathrooms I told him, I told the software we had, based on how many exit, how big they are, and so on. It's going to compute how many people are allowed. And in that case, I can only have 39 people. And we could wonder why we should have so few people in that space. And again, here we can dive in and explore where this number is coming from. And in that case, it's actually the plumbing requirements are limiting the number of people, and this is just because I don't have enough bathroom. And if you look at it, in the CAD, there is only one bathroom per gender, which drives this 39. And so I designed it for 110 people, but actually I should only be able to have 39 people. So whenever we want to actually deploy this space, we know we will have to do some construction work to add more bathrooms and toilets to that space. So now let's assume we do this work and we communicate with the client, and we're happy with that. We can move to the next stage, which has to do with procurement and buying things. But before we do this, the client might want to know how many things they have per space and have pricing information. And so we've allowed we allow users to group things by what we call zone, and we group we derive high-level information from the zones. And so here I know how many products. So this is a bookshelf I specified earlier. We have all the tables that are in that space, and we have a rough cost per square foot and the capacity that this space can accommodate. It's already based on what you've put in here. And then at a higher level, we maintain, as I mentioned, the schedule, and you can also start diving in. And in the idea of creating purchase order and buying those things, you might want to start grouping those things by your manufacturer to see, who you will have to contact to buy those things. And that's where some of the challenges that we're facing are obvious. Right now, for this simple layout, I'm probably dealing with 10 different manufacturers. And so, this one is only going to provide the chairs. This one is going to provide those different chairs and the desks. And so everybody, everything is talks to really a different manufacturers. So having the ability to take the schedule and quickly change that into purchase orders and manage all the invoicing is really critical. Otherwise, you end up spending much more time procuring those goods than you spend designing it. Designing is, happens really quickly. If you have a good designer, they can draft this layout in an hour maximum. Like we've done some exercises in house, or we design spaces regularly, and it just goes really quickly. Like you just lay out a few furniture, you check compliance, you assign a bunch of products, so you can have your space plan done really quickly. But the whole it's a lot of back and forth with all those different actors. And so that's part of the things we're currently working on heavily. And I'm just going to jump back to the presentation to talk about this. So that's, managing all those purchase order and, being able to distribute them to different vendors, being able to be paid based on, who you put it from. And even the payment is sometimes tricky because you get paid by your client and then you need to pay your vendor. And with payment, they are not like credit card payments. You pay 50% upfront and then 100% when it gets deployed. So there are a lot of like intricacies which, if you've dealt with a construction project, are happening all the time. But if we are aiming for very sharp turnaround, having a managed marketplace, we really need to address that, or we really need to push towards a direction where somebody can just go in, lay out a plan, and then order it. And then they can, put their bank details, and then somehow the payment process is automated or is managed through something that is going to be a lot more streamlined than back and forth emails and annotated drawings and spreadsheets. And the last component that we're just starting to build now. So we're deploying a few spaces now where we put these tags on all the furniture, RFID tags. And this is so that we know where everything is. And so again, as our customers buy subscriptions, they buy the subscriptions into us tracking their goods. And so we guarantee that we know, we scan the space on a regular basis, we know where the furnitures are, and we update our floor plans accordingly, or their floor plans accordingly. And what this gives us is constant inventory of the goods that any one of our customers have. But when you think about it at the scale of this portfolio, it starts to be very powerful, because if you're Facebook and you're opening a new office, you don't have to buy new furniture only. You can also use some of the goods you have, and you can, at least not everything is useful, but at least you get a balance between these two things. And this is not only for the planet, it's also from a business standpoint. It's just much cheaper to reuse goods than to buy new ones. So, the planet story of this working for the environment is very important to us, but it might not be as important to our clients or our customers. But they also have an interest in reusing goods or buying secondhand. And sometimes the real barrier to buying secondhand is having access to information. And so what we're doing with this whole managed marketplace is to, bubble up all this used good information and have it available to designers, not to, somebody down the line that could make a decision much later. It's really at the design time that you start to be able to have leverage on those sort of things. So the last bit is, we know you're not going to build everything that you need to do with a layout or with a space planning tool. So we're planning to open up our APIs early next year, so that you can at least interrogate your layouts. So if you want to, plug your layout into IoT solutions or into issue ticketing systems, we're going to open our APIs just so that people can build third-party integrations on top of their data. Again, we're here to manage the space. We're not here to facilitate, managing your meeting rooms and so on and so forth. We're just about like the layout of the space and what goes in it. So what's next? I think so for the last year, we've pushed really hard on the space planning side of things, and we've got to a point where we have a tool that we use almost every day, but we have customers using for laying out their space. We've connected that to a catalog of products, but that's not enough. Like, we need to allow people to buy goods on our platform without transacting from us, without having to go through the painful process of sending a lot of back and forth email. And that's what I think about when I mention the self-serve storefront. It's really allowing our users to just log in and order a few furniture or lay out a space, an architect if they need to, and then be able to go through the procurement process seamlessly. We don't want to forget about the space planning because we know that's just too important. And so we're going to push really hard on building a lot of collaborative features. So we already have the ability to comment on our layouts and respond to comments and these kind of things, but we want to go one step further and facilitate the multi-user interactions so that you allow really much more collaboration in real time. And I think for the past 2 years, this has become really high on the agenda for people because you communicate a lot through virtual meetings, and then just popping up a web page and showing a layout and explaining, oh, this is how you would do it is just very meaningful today, and a lot of people start working that way. And so we're going to push on that side of things. The next item is really talking to automation. And when we think about automation, we don't necessarily about automating the space planning side of things. We think about automating the research of products. It's like, you start designing a space and you have access to our catalog of products, but there are still 1,000 products or 2,000 products in there, and you don't really know where to start. And so we're going to start building a recommendation engine, which is very much what you get when you log in on Amazon, and it tells you, last time you bought this, maybe you're interested in this sort of things. So Amazon is very broad and it's really B2B, but like the similar things apply to interior design, where if you design three different layouts for a given customer, they are really likely to buy similar goods, to have similar taste in terms of what they put next to each other, and so on and so forth. And that's where our recommendation system kicks in. And the final one is focused around environmental rating and material science. So we started in like putting embodied carbon data into our products and collecting this information, but it's a really hard problem to solve. And the reality is every manufacturer communicates this data differently. Some of them communicate embodied carbon for a life cycle of what they call cradle to grave, which is basically from the sourcing of a material all the way to the recycling or the destroying part of the chair of the object. And others just go to the point where they sell it, and they just give you a number. And so these numbers are very, very different. In one case, you just go to the vendor, and then whenever it's deployed, that's it. They don't take into account any of the destruction process, moving those things, and so on. And in the other case, they go all the way to the destruction phase. And so gathering this information is really complicated. And the other reality is that embodied carbon is only one side of the equation. And there are many other environmental factors that makes you choose one object versus another. Like, does it contain glue? Does it contain plastic? Is it recyclable, etc., etc. So we're working on a lot of like research around these topics so that we can have our own environmental rating about products, so that when you specify your things, it's really obvious where the weaknesses are, where the things that are not doing so great from an environmental impact perspective are. And today we do that with embodied carbon, but ideally we would like to go one step further and start to develop our own way of rating these things, or integrate with somebody that has got a great way of rating those products. So that's really what I had to say today, and I think everything I've shown wouldn't be here without this amazing team of people. So today we're 9 of us, and some of us joined during the last year, but most of what you've seen is really the aggregation of all these people working together. We all come from very different backgrounds, very different specialties, but we all share one thing in common, is that we've all spent time in the architecture and construction industry. And I think that's what brings us together, and that's what makes us eager to build this thing and to get the solution right in terms of what we're doing. So I would like to thank you all for listening, and just final word. If you want to be a part of it, if you want to be a part of it as a customer, if you're interested in what we're doing, if you would like to hear more, if you would like to join us, every door is open. We're currently hiring. So, if you have an interest, just drop us a line and we make sure to respond. Thank you. And any question, just go for it. I'm happy to respond.
All right. Thanks, Nicolas. That was super interesting. We do have a couple of questions. Let's start with Maya. She also got 4 thumbs up. Great work. In the demo, you show the process for the designer. What does the process for the good supplier look like? Who and how do you upload available goods? Where does imagery, product information, environmental data come from, etc.?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Maya. I think that's a really good question. So today we have a product information management system. So we have a whole catalog of products that list all the things we have, and we input this data manually by going on vendor websites, or not semi-manually by kind of harvesting this information through automated workflows. But in reality, it's really us messaging this data and through a back and forth with our vendors. That's how we do it. Ideally, we would like our vendor and partner to chip in and do this, like input this information. It's just that today we don't have a good reason to do this. If we were moving millions of dollars of furniture, we would certainly go and put their data in today. But that's not the case. So we're working on business case and workflows that allow that create incentives for us and for them to really log in, input their data, and start upgrading our catalog to having something that is always up to date. So in terms of carbon, in terms of lead time, pricing, these things change all the time. Like a lead time could go from 6 weeks to 10 weeks to 12 weeks from one day to the next. And we don't know. Only the vendor or the manufacturer know, and they don't have APIs to do this. So somebody has to go in and put this information. And so the obvious point we see today is whenever you create a so we're really kickstarting this. So whenever you start working on a layout, you put your furniture in the plan, and then at some point you're like, this starts to look good. We're working on workflows where you would send notifications to your partners, to our vendors, which is an email with a link. Basically, they go to this link, they see a page with a product info, and they can start correcting things that could be wrong, or updating fields that are missing, and so on and so forth. And at that point, they have a very strong incentive, because whatever is in this layout, we're going to buy it. So if they don't fix it now, we'll have to fix it later in the process anyway. And so, we're just facilitating something that we do no matter what. We just do it through our platform, and so that the data gets ingested again instead of doing it through back and forth emails. And so that's the starting point. The ambition is that when we're growing and we're bigger, people just go on a platform and they update their data, they put it updated, and they maintain it on our platform. But that's really more of a late 2022-23 objective.
That's really cool. I have a follow-up question that I'm going to ask right away, and it's about the inventory, so the stock. Where is it usually being held? I mean,
so.
Is it a problem if say, because most of the goods, or maybe all the goods you deal with, are being reused? So if I need 200 of these type of chairs and you only have 199, what happens there? Do you request a new one from the manufacturer?
Yeah. So there are two things. There is the stock from the manufacturers themselves, so new goods, and this is just non-existent, or very it depends. Some manufacturers have stock, other build to whenever you want to buy something. So the stock here is very fuzzy. The stock that is clear is the stock you've deployed, or the stock that our network of customers have deployed in space. And that's really what we refer to as inventory. And so the idea is that with this tagging, whenever you deploy a space, we know that we saw this information, and then we bubble that up. So, if you're someone and we know you're going to decommission your space, all these goods are marked as inventory items and not used items or placed items. And at that point, it goes into our database of things you can design with. And so if you've placed chairs that look like this, then you can suggest, oh, why don't you use 10 of those? Or why don't you use these 20 of us that are in New York today, and you could just get today at this discount price, rather than having to buy one. And so, of course, you will miss some. And then it's a decision, like, do I go with mix? And some people would be more than happy to have part of a layout with certain furniture and then have a bit of diversity. Others would have a very strong design language and would just say, like, I want all the chairs the same. And then, yes, maybe like they just buy new ones, but at least they have the option to, like, the options are obvious. The data is here, the information is here, rather than, having to send emails and ask questions and, like, having delay in responding and so on. At least
Nice.
here, you just interrogate it and you have the information straight away.
Awesome. Bob is asking about the EC3 Carbon database. It seems like it's becoming a standard for the building systems, but furniture systems in Carbon is something quite unique. Does the platform allow for understanding carbon of these less prefab elements too, like flooring materials?
Yes, so flooring materials. So reality is we haven't looked so much into these things yet. We're really focused on furniture first, and we're tracking this information for furniture first. And yes, if EC3 is a standard and the data is here and there is an easy way of grabbing it, like yes, we should totally do this. It's just that today we focused on what we're doing first and furniture was the first thing coming. But of course, when we start deploying entire spaces with flooring solution and carpeting and whatnot, then yes, we need to start looking at the rest of the material that we put in that are more construction kind of materials, more lino-based kind of things, rather than counts. And here, like, probably that a lot of tools exist. Like, we've been in touch with a few, and there's definitely a bit more diversity and standard that have been defined. Maybe furniture is the only one that, or like, is really the real one that is complicated. We didn't anticipate it when we started. We're like, we're just going to get this carbon data and we'll be good. In reality, it's much harder than that because there is no real standard and information is scattered in PDF and they explain how it's computed and, like, in words, not in digital form.
Nice. We have another question from Theodoros. He's asking about if you're planning to incorporate tools that would leverage current or prior use patterns of a space and furniture by occupants.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by incorporate tools. We're planning to develop tools around these use cases, yes. So that's what I was referring to when I mentioned recommendation engines. That's really like, you've designed something like that before, why don't you do this again? Like, it's this kind of things that we're planning on doing in the near future. So yes.
Then I'll switch to the Q&A tab. We have one there from Marco. In terms of minimizing carbon footprint, curious to hear where you think the biggest lift is. Is it reusing furniture, reusing building stock, or how to measure that as Canoa pushes forward?
I think that's a good question. And there are many aspects to it. So there is the embedded carbon, which is your construction related carbon, so the materials that you put in a space and you destroy and reuse. And that's really what I've been talking about today. And when I said this 50%, it was related to that. And then there is the whole operation side of things, which is energy consumption, heating and so on and so forth. And we're just not looking at that because there are a lot of people that do retrofit and, work on installation solutions and better HVAC systems and whatnot. And we're just not looking at it because we cannot do everything. And so now, what's the biggest lift in terms of furniture versus building stock versus reusing building stock? I think, I don't know, the simple answer is the more you reuse, the better. That's just the basic starting point. Reuse is better than anything. So, if we go with a pattern where we're trying to reuse as much as possible, that's just going to be beneficial no matter what. I think that's really our position. And then beyond that, it gets really complicated and you don't know if it's this or that, but like, very something simple. If we don't create something new, that's less carbon, less material, less things that we need to source from nature and so on.
How localized is your service? Do you ship nationally in the United States? Do you have a different policies in terms of uh, where furniture can be purchased from and shipped to?
So we're working primarily only in the US today. I would even go as saying only in some states in the US because we're in process of expanding this list as we go, just because you need a license for every state you're working. But it's just a process, and it takes a bit of time. So as we go, we'll expand throughout the US, and we've had a few conversations with people in Europe. And I think again, if you think about our business, we're not about doing everything ourselves. It's just about building a platform that in the very near future will be self-served. And so if I can see a very near future where we partner with people in Europe and engineers, architects, and vendors that just go on the platform and manage their customers themselves. With us having a very lightweight touch just to help them use the software rather than moving goods and doing the designs ourselves. Not sure if that answers it. And then from a shipping perspective, yes, we're trying to track where the furniture is coming from. And so we're just trying to limit travel distances. Even if our designers love European things, we're trying to limit that.
Nice, thanks. I did have another question. I couldn't help noticing that you only have 2/3 software people in your team, engineers. How could you come up with such an amazing product,
I think it's a lot of pragmatic decisions. A lot of, I'll tell you something that I'm not sure I'm allowed to tell, but we had to make decisions that are, so today, okay, a year in, we are at a state where our product is used by people that we don't know. It's not us, right? Or people we know, it's not us. It's not like people that we sit next to it, it's not friends, it's just random or clients that send interest in this. So I think a year in, we've managed to build something that is used by customers that are not, not us and have not used this thing every day and are not power users anymore. And we definitely had to make decisions about how we did this. And one of them, so all of them are related around reuse existing source code, reuse existing code bases, reuse tools as much as possible. So for example, the whole graphics that powers the layout engine. First of all, it's 2D, it's not 3D, which simplifies a lot of things. And then we powered by a gaming engine that handles all the rendering, and so it's not easy. It's a bit like when you use 3ds at the beginning. It's easy, but then it becomes much harder whenever you want to have more than a few objects in the scene. But it's easier than having to program against your graphic card. So that's one of them. And then another one is, for example, all of the compliance checking that you see happening, or part of it is tapping into Excel spreadsheets. That's the reality of it. And the benefit of, we had a lot of discussions about should we do this or not. And I know a lot of my engineering friends would just say, never do this, it's just going to break. But then the benefit is that we have Lance, our architect in chief, he just knows everything about rules and regulations in the US. We could just have him working with spreadsheets directly and document the information he knows about those things, and edit them, add rows, add columns. It does best in this format, and then we can just use that as that powers all of our compliance checks, and so it was a bit of a risk initially, but then we realized it's just working and it's reliable, and I doing a bit of research, I realized a lot of people are powering some of the early tech stacks with Google spreadsheets or Excel spreadsheets. As long as you're not looking for 10 millisecond latency, it's all good.
Or a track and trace, national track and trace application.
So we use Google Sheets, not Excel spreadsheets.
That's awesome. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Seems like no, but it was an amazing presentation. It was very informative. Thanks. I
I'm
would
glad you liked it.
Yeah. So I think this concludes this session. If there are any last minute questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we have still one ongoing session. It's the last one of today from Violet Whitney, Columbia. And then we have our final panel to conclude the conference that will happen at, let me check the schedule. It's at 5:30. So as soon as Violet's session finishes, we'll have our panel. It will last an hour, and then the conference is over. But we invite everyone who's based in London to come for drinks. Nicolas will be there. I will be there. Some other Speckle team members will be there. And yeah, that's it. All the videos will be available, are available on Hopin a few minutes or hours after each session. We'll make them available on YouTube as well if you missed anything. Thanks a lot, Nicola and Canoa, for the presentation. It's very insightful. And
thanks for having us.
Yeah,
it's great. No, it's great to share what we do. You work hard, and then sometimes it's just nice to share and see what everybody else is doing. So thanks for putting that together.
And if there is anyone who would love to work with this amazing team, we have some messages in the chat with email addresses and contacts. So do reach out to them. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.